to the Peaceful Entrepreneur Podcast, where together we're learning how to have peace in the process of everyday business ownership by improving one step at a time how we think and what we do. I'm your host, Amy Stout. Today we are going to dive into the super fun topic of personality tests. And I have to start out by saying that I feel like there's such a spectrum of opinions on personality tests. I personally absolutely love them and probably can fall a little bit into the camp of like getting too into them. Whereas I married someone who is like not about them, does not want to be put in a box. So where do you fall? Do you love them? Do you hate them? Are you indifferent to them? I want to know why. I'm here for all the opinions because at this point I am like strong enough in my own opinion that I'm not going to get offended or swayed. But I will say, I do think they have their place. And I do think that in the world of entrepreneurship and building a business, and especially building a team, it can be really helpful to have a tool to tell you a little bit about yourself and about the people who you're working with so that you can have yourself and them in the most ideal roles for them. So I genuinely do think that they are a tool. I think where it gets over the line is when people turn it into an identity. And like I said, I've definitely been guilty of kind of going into that. And so that is kind of the line that I want to draw. But today, I just kind of want to talk about 4 main personality tests that I have experience with and kind of share what I think the pros and cons of each of them are. And I will kind of work my way to my favorite. So I'll save the best for last, in my opinion, and share like why I really do think that they can be helpful for you and your business. Okay, so let's start with the natural starting place, which is the Enneagram, because I feel like that has just like taken over. And there has just been this wave of popularity with the Enneagram, right? Like there are entire businesses and entire Instagram accounts just built around the Enneagram. And I will say that this was my like first experience with really resonating with a personality test, because I would say in college, I wasn't extremely introspective. I wasn't able to look inward and clearly articulate what was going on with me. And so when I found the Enneagram and I read about the type that I am, it finally put words to the things that I had in my head but wasn't able to articulate. And I think that's why I latched onto it so much, because it was finally like, oh my gosh, yes, I can describe myself and I can explain why I do what I do, because the Enneagram is based off of your motivations for why you do what you do. Rather than just like typing you based on what you do, it's the motivation and the why behind it. So you and I could do the exact same thing, but for a totally different reason, and we would be different things on the Enneagram. So that is what really kind of got me into this world. And I will also say that I love me a good categorization. I love me some organization. So if I could categorize myself, I'll do that all day long. But anyways, so for the Enneagram, I enjoyed that piece that it really described like my deep intentions. And I still go back to it like fairly often. And I specifically think about how I'm a 1. And so the 1s are very ethical and they want to do the right thing and they don't want to be wrong and they don't want to be bad. And that is still a very core like thing within me that the Enneagram just helped me put words to, if that makes sense. So that is something that still sticks with me years later after I have discovered this test. But I do think that this is the one that people can so easily fall into making their entire identity. And like when I first found it, I was so excited about it that I totally did that, you know? And my friends were into it too. And honestly, like we still use it as a tool and we're still like, oh yeah, that's so like 1 of me, whatever. But it's not as like pervasive and like overarching to how we're thinking about ourselves, right? So I do think that the Enneagram is super helpful. I also love how they do some relation to each other among the types. And so it's kind of in a circle, and you have like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you're related to the 2 on either side of you, and you're also related to the ones across from you in a certain way. So you'll go to the characteristics of a certain number when you're healthy, and you'll go to the characteristics of another number when you're unhealthy. And that's been really helpful for me to kind of see the relationships between the types and see why I'm drawn to certain people, because I find that a lot of my friends, my husband, my team members even, are this one specific type that happens to be the one that I go toward when I'm healthy. And so it makes so much sense that it's like, that's why I'm drawn to you. And you can even read, like, they have little things about how the 1 and the 8 are together, and the 2 and the 4 and all of that. And so as a friendship and as a couple, it kind of helped put words like, oh yeah, yep, that is how we are. And for me, another big one with the Enneagram is that it explained why someone did what they did, right? And so it helps me to not be upset with someone as much just because they do something differently, because it helps me understand their motivation. And if I understand their motivation, then I won't be so quick to judge what they do. So it has been very, very helpful, and I do think it's a good one, but all I will say is I think that there are better ones for the purposes of entrepreneurship. So I'm going to just touch really quickly on Myers-Briggs, because I just feel like it's a big, significant one. So there are kind of 4 things that the Myers-Briggs is classifying. So it's introversion versus extroversion, sensing, like perceiving versus intuition in your gut, thinking in your head versus feeling, like in your heart, and judging versus perceiving. And so you're like one or the other. But I think it's cool that it puts you on a spectrum. So for my results, the introversion versus extroversion, I was on the extrovert side, but I wasn't very far from the middle, if that makes sense. So I'm like still not a super, super extrovert, but I am somewhat one. And that one helps me because it's like, okay, this makes sense why I do have some introverted tendencies and enjoy being a homebody and I'm fine being alone and all of these things. I'm not just an extrovert or an introvert. There's like a spectrum within it. And I think that is what I really like specifically about Myers-Briggs. But honestly, I haven't gotten super deep into it. And so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. What I am going to spend some time on are my 2 favorites. And these, I think, are the ones that are going to be the most helpful to you as a business owner and as someone who builds a team, perhaps as well. So my first favorite one is the working genius. And I was introduced to this by a couple of friends over the last couple of years that are like, you would love this thing. And I was like, okay, yeah, cool, I'll look into it. And then I didn't until December. So I finally was like, the 3rd person in a row had told me about it. And I was like, okay, I have to read this book. So I ordered the book and I read it in December of last year. And oh my goodness, they were right. I am so obsessed with this. So the working genius is 6 types, and it's all based on the process of a project from the idea of it to the completion of it. And the idea is that of these 6 parts of the process, you will be strong at 2 of them. They'll be your geniuses. You will be competent at 2 of them. So you can do them, but they're not your most ideal thing. And you will be frustrated by 2 of them. And this one just makes so much sense. And you'll see what I mean, that it's like, if your whole team can take this, then you'll be able to very easily figure out where people fit into the puzzle of the team and the ideal role that they can have based on these types. So here are the 6 types. The first one is wonder. So it's just like the dreamer, the initial idea haver, someone who just loves to just spitball ideas, right? Invention is the next one, which is the more fleshing out of the details of the idea. Discernment is the next, which is basically okay, here's all the ideas, but which one's actually the right? What should we actually do? Kind of narrowing in. Galvanizing is kind of rallying the troops, right? Someone who is really good at getting people on board and excited to do something. Enablement is someone who is good at equipping other people to do their job. And then tenacity is the last one, which is someone who just loves to check off a to-do list and see something through to the end. And so I actually have not taken this test because when I read it in December, I was so excited about it. And I just talked about it with a bunch of people and I tried to figure out what I was. And I was like, you know what? Before I take this test, I need to take some distance from it because I'm just going to be overthinking it, right? So I think it's about time. I think I'm going to take the test now. So maybe I'll do it by the time this episode comes out so that if you read my email today, you can see what I am. That would be fun. Okay, I'll do that. So read the email today to see what my 2 genius types are. But I actually do plan to also give this to my team because we are now a team of 5, including me. And I would love to know what everyone's true strengths are so that we can get them to the most ideal thing possible. I will also say that if this has piqued your interest at all, I would totally recommend reading the book because it is not dry at all. It is he tells about how the process came to be, how they developed the framework. And it's very story driven and it's very interesting. So I read it within a few days, a few sittings. It was super fun to read. So highly recommend. So my very, very favorite last one that I want to spend some time talking about is the Strengths Finder. This is one that I've known about for a while, and you probably have heard about it as well. But I only recently, last summer, took it, and then last winter, November, December, sat down with a coach. Luke and I actually both took it, and we both sat down with this coach, and he kind of helped us understand what our results meant for who we are, the role we're in, and also how we interact with each other. And it was so cool. And I will tell you guys that, like I said, Luke is not a fan of these things usually, but he actually did really like the Strength Finders. And so I'll just throw that out there to say, if he endorses it, it means it's extra good. But if you are not familiar with Strengths Finder, I keep saying it wrong. It's Strengths Finder, but I always say Strength Finders. So sorry if I do both. But there are basically 34 identified strengths. And they're things like positivity, responsibility, adaptability, command, all of these different just descriptors. And you take a test which is it asks you questions or says sentences, and you have to choose whether you strongly disagree or strongly agree or somewhere in the middle. And basically once you finish the test, it ranks all 34 qualities. And so you take your top 5, and that's your main characteristics that you can kind of build and understand and interpret your results based off of. So you will probably not be surprised to learn that Luke and I had totally different top 5s. We don't have a single one in common, which I think is super cool, honestly, because it shows how God has so uniquely gifted us. But I will say that the coach said when we sat down, he was like, you guys are so different, but so complementary. And it makes me really happy. I love that. So I want to share my personal results here with StrengthsFinder and just kind of share how it has impacted me and what it has taught me and how I've been able to use it. And I might share a little bit about Luke's as well. So my top strength is responsibility, which is not at all surprising. And the description that just hits right to the core of me is I take psychological ownership of everything I commit to. That it's basically I'm true to my word to a fault. It's really hard for me to go back on my word. And it's hard for me to say no in the first place because I'm oh, I can do that. Yes. I can do the thing and I will do the thing and I'll do it well. And I just overcommit myself. That's the downfall because some of your obviously greatest strengths can turn into your greatest weaknesses. And I think that's what I see a lot with the responsibility is just the over commitment and taking on too much, even just mentally. It's sometimes just more often than not now, just I take on too much mentally. And so, but it does make me a really good, service provider because the service is going to get done and it's going to get done well. And so double-edged sword there. My next 2 kind of go together, so I'm going to talk about them together, futuristic and strategic. So futuristic means that you are future minded. You can envision the future very clearly, and you love to dream. Like you get so excited to dream. And this was one of those that I was like, yes, I do. Like when I think about the future, I get so hype and so excited, and it's just the best. Like if I want to put myself in a good mood, all I have to do is that. And so strategic pairs nicely because strategic means you can analyze and figure out how to get to where you want to go. So again, makes me a good business owner because I can envision the future and I can also figure out how to get there. Also makes me a good consultant for other people because if they don't have those skills, I can do it on behalf of them, which is really cool. So something that really, really, really stood out to me from my time with the coach is he said, you need to give yourself time to think every day. Like because of these qualities that you have, like your brain needs space to think. And I could not have resonated with anything more than that because I feel stifled if I don't have time to think. Like I will often, sometimes daily, definitely multiple times a week, get this idea or this thought in my head. And like, I need to see it through, whether it's talking it out or staring into space or writing it in a journal. Like I need to get it out. And if I don't have the space for that, it's like, oh, it's hard. So that is something that I immediately took and made practical. So I built daily thinking time into my schedule for this year. And it's been amazing. It hasn't played out exactly how I thought it would, but actually more on that in 2 weeks. I'm having an episode on when your plans don't turn out like what you think they will. So come back for that one. But I will say just clearing space and time for myself to think, recognizing that that's important, knowing that I need it helps me to carve out the time for it more. You know what I mean? So that's been awesome. My fourth of my top 5 is relator. And that was the one that I looked at and I was like, what does that mean? It's not very self-explanatory, but what it means is I enjoy fostering deeper relationships with the people that I already know. So I'm not opposed to meeting new people, but if I were to choose, I would pick having a deep conversation and getting to know someone I already know better than meeting someone new. And this informs so much why I have just naturally built a business based on ongoing monthly services. Like our clients, when they sign on, I don't even have a minimum package for them. I don't ask them to re-up. It's just a rolling monthly thing until one or both of us is like, we're done, which doesn't usually happen. So just this rolling thing. And like when I think of like, oh, who do I want to spend time with? It's like my friends that I already am close with and my family that I already am close with. And again, not opposed to new people. Definitely enjoy that. But I do think that being a relator makes me a good business owner in terms of fostering that relationship with my clients as well as my team. Like I want to know my team. I care about them personally, and they have shared that they really appreciate that, right? And so that quality really helps me in that arena. And then it also, of course, helps me in my friendships in life. My last one is achiever. Again, no surprise there. I love to check off a to-do list, and I need to feel productive in some way. I have gotten to the point where I do understand that rest is productive, and so I can feel productive even if I'm not doing anything. But I do love to feel productive. And so I will be very interested to see what my working genius results are, because I feel like I have both ends of the spectrum. Like I have the wonder and I love to dream, but then I also have the tenacity because I love to get stuff done. So I wonder if I'm like the two bookends. We'll have to see. But all 5 of my top 5, I look at them and I'm like, this is why I'm an entrepreneur. And this is why I've had success. Like, it's so crazy that it's like all of these qualities. It's like, oh yeah, that makes it make sense. And then for Luke, like, it's so fascinating. It's helped me to understand him. I will just talk briefly about his. So his top one is belief. Again, another one that you're like, what does that mean? But it basically means that like the things that are really important to him that he believes in strongly are like of utmost importance. Like he has strong opinions and thoughts. But if something does not fall into that category, it literally does not matter to him. And I was like, oh, this makes so much sense, because on a regular basis, he's pretty chill, doesn't have a ton of opinions. But like, if you bring up music or movies or, like a certain specific thing that he cares a lot about, he suddenly has a very strong opinion. And that made it make so much sense. So if you know someone like that, maybe they have belief. And it's kind of cool because the rest of his qualities are like so different from that. So the rest of his qualities are adaptability, positivity, developer, and empathy. And I'm like, oh, yes, this is why you are like, this explains you to a T. Like Luke, if I'm sad, he knows the exact second to say something funny and he never times it wrong. And that's the empathy. And when he came on with the business and just like started helping me with whatever I needed and just like did whatever, that's the adaptability. Like it didn't freak him out to like not really know what he was doing. He just like was on board for whatever I needed. Positivity, of course, always upbeat, and that is such a beautiful quality to have. And then developer. I really love developer because I am so not like this. So developer means you can like see the path for someone to grow, but you're like patient with it. Like you just want to see them to the next step. You could just help them get to the next step. And I'm like, oh, he's going to be such a good dad. Like I could cry thinking about it. But anyways, I'm so impatient. I'm like, achiever, let's get to it, and he's got that developer. So maybe he could be a trainer, for our team, or, that quality could be used in so many ways. And so just to kind of wrap up the StrengthsFinder conversation, it tells you so much about yourself, and it makes so much make sense. And I think especially if you can sit down with a coach or read the book, I have the books, I haven't read them yet, but if you could just like dive into it and see how your qualities like relate to each other and what they mean, it informs so much about who you are. And since it's qualities, it's like less prone to be taken on as an identity, like the Enneagram. It's just like, no, I knew I had these qualities, and like now I understand like that they are like floating to the top, like why these ones stand out. And I also think that the StrengthsFinders is super valuable because it is highly developed. Like there are people who are registered coaches, people who use it for leadership development and workshops. There are like so many additional materials that you can be provided with after you take the test. And you can like pay to just get your top 5, or you can get your top 10, or you can get your whole 34. And so there's just like so much material out there and so much to be learned and used. So I just really value StrengthsFinders. So I am going to start with having my team do Working Genius because it's just like less of an undertaking. But I do think one day it would be really cool to do the StrengthsFinder with the whole team as well, and like bring a coach in and have a little workshop and all that fun stuff. So there are my opinions on 4 of the main personality tests, and I would love to know what you think. And if you have another one that you're like, why didn't you talk about this one? This is my favorite, or whatever. So I would love to continue the conversation. Either reply to my email, let me know what you think about my Working Genius results, or just send me a DM wherever you're at. I would love to know. And before I go, just a quick separate ask is I would love to start creating some episodes based off of some questions or thoughts that you have. So if there's something that you're like, Amy, can you just talk about this? Or like, hey, you mentioned this one thing and I'd love for you to go into it. Or if you are personally going through a struggle in your business that you're like, I just can't figure out how to find peace in this area, I would love it if you would just send that my way. Just send me a DM or an email to hello@thepeacefulentrepreneur.com. And I want to start building some episodes around your requests. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Let me know if you did. Please leave a rating and a review wherever you're listening. And I will see you again next week. Bye. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. Don't forget to connect with us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And we would love it if you would leave a review wherever you're listening. We'll see you next week for more tips for how to become a peaceful entrepreneur.